folks in. Hello, everyone. We're just taking a minute to let everyone in. It'll just be another moment. Welcome, welcome. Hope everyone is having a wonderful Wednesday so far.
Great hump day.
All right. Yeah, hump day. Happy hump day. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us. My name is Sari. I am the Public Programs Director of MOFAD. So we're just letting everyone in. It'll just be another couple seconds. I'm sure some of you recognize me from past programs, so welcome back. If you're coming in our Zoom room for the first time, welcome. It is fantastic to have you. This is, the way we've been doing programs now for over a year, and it's super exciting to have so many new faces all the time from all over the place. And of course have amazing guests like Matthew Raiford and Carla Hall, who are both in Georgia this evening. And certainly one of the only good things about this pandemic has given us the ability to find ways to connect with people that we normally wouldn't have in New York City. So it's so special to have both of these guests with us tonight. So I want them both just to take a minute and tell you a little bit about themselves. I want to quickly thank Kitchen Arts and Letters, our bookstore partner. I know so many of you bought Matthew's beautiful new cookbook. So congratulations, Matthew. I'm so happy that we're celebrating the launch of your book, Bress and Nyam, and we're going to hear more about that tonight. So Matthew, why don't you first introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello, everyone. My name is Chef Farmer, aka Chef Farmer Matthew Raiford. I am a 6th generation farmer, and I am hailing from Brunswick, Georgia, originally born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but raised right here in what is euphemistically called the Deep South.
Wonderful. And I'm going to pass it over to a very familiar face to most of you, I assume, Chef Carla Hall. She is going to introduce herself, and then she's just going to take it away from there. There's going to be some time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to, drop comments in the chat, but Carla will make sure to take questions at the end. So thank you, Chef Farmer Matthew. Thank you so much, Chef Carla. We're so honored to have you with us tonight. Enjoy the show, everyone.
Thank you, Sari. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I'm Carla Hall, and I am from Nashville, Tennessee, but I am in Atlanta, Georgia. So all you Georgians out there, Matthew, this is the closest I've been to you in like a year and a half or so.
I know.
Right? Some of you all may know me from Top Chef, which I did season 5, like 13 years ago. And then I did it again, season 8, All Stars. I was on the Chew for about 7 years, and Matthew and I met when I did my cookbook, Carla Hall's Soul Food Every Day in Celebration, and we're going to sort of get into that journey of finding ourselves. And Matthew, I want to start out with this because it was a journey for me to get back to even acknowledging our food as soul food. I called it Southern food. I called it Southern food. I didn't even call it soul food. And it was a journey coming back. So talk to me about your journey back to the farm that you said that you were never going to set foot in except for weddings and funerals.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You remember that conversation? Well, let's just start off there. I mean, I was raised here in Brunswick, Georgia. I'm a child of the 70s and early 80s. And the South that we live in right now, where everybody seems to be enjoying each other and things like that, was not quite the South that I was raised in. And I oftentimes tell people the story of, like, when I was 10 years old, being denied the right to use the bathroom and have someone actually say, we don't have any bathrooms for y'all in here. That for me was like a starting point in my life of like, I got to go. I don't know where I'm gonna go, but I gotta get out of here. So I left Brunswick at the ripe young age of 18. I joined the military for 10 years, traveled all over the world, saw a lot, did a lot, all that kind of good stuff. And then I was able to cook in every country that I went in. I was not a cook in the military. I didn't do anything that resembled cooking, but I was able to like finagle my way into a Korean stall one time. I was in a shawarma booth one time. I even had the opportunity to work in Oktoberfest in Munich, Germany one time. So I've always wanted to be around food and love that, but my dad didn't want me to go into culinary. And so I showed him I went in the military, and then that just blew everybody's mind with that one. And then when I got out, I was going to Howard University. And so at Howard, I was a 28-year-old freshman at Howard University. And what do 28-year-old freshmen do? They throw big parties. And so I threw like these massive parties. And I always had lots of food, and some of my best friends right now that I went to Howard with, like Eldon and Buddha and Russell and all of them, they were like seniors and in doctoral programs. Like Jackie is a psychologist right now. So they were all in my age group, but way further along so far as schooling went. So they would come and go, dude, what? Every time you throw this party, like there's always food. Like, where did you? I said, oh man, I cooked that. It was nothing to it. And my friend Russell was like, man, I'm telling you, you are wasting your time going to school to be a physical therapist. And I was like, nah, dude, like, that's the deal. Well, in 1995, you had to have a master's degree to practice physical therapy. It changed. So I went to my counselor and was like, hey, how many years of school do I need to have before I can become a physical therapist? And they were like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to get your master's. So and at the rate that you're going, it's gonna be like getting a doctorate because you can barely write at this point, right? Because I've been in the military for 10 years. So fresh out of high school, I go in the military. I go from being a computer programmer in high school to doing recon for the military. Go figure. Let's not talk about it. But for some reason, I thought jumping out of airplanes might be exciting. I thought riding in the back of tanks, that was exciting. I thought about, walking out by myself 25 miles and just hanging out would be exciting. So I didn't do anything that resembled any of the things or occupations that I wanted to go into. And so I told my friend, I said, if you find me one Black chef, somebody that looks like me, that's making almost 6 figures, I'll go for almost. I'll think about it. And in 2 weeks, they introduced me to Chef Erlis Bell. And I walk in, I'm at the JW Marriott, and I'm waiting. And this Black guy's walking up to me, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, who are you here for, young man? And I was like, I'm waiting for the chef. Now, he has on a chef's coat. It says executive chef on it, but something in my head it kind of was like, I didn't see it. And so he was like, well, I'm Chef Erlis Bell. And I was like, wait, what? And I had never seen it before in my life. So I was like, wait, there's an opportunity here. You love to cook, blah, blah, blah. And then next thing you know, I was at the African Heritage dinner that they did with like Chef Joe Randall and Leah Chase, and all of them were there. And I was like, oh my God, these are like the all-star of anybody. Like I had heard of these people, but I had never met these people, right? But I still didn't think they were making money. I just thought they were, made it to this point. But then as I started talking, I was like, oh, wait, there might be some money in this. And then next thing you know, I was at the Olympics in 1996 in Atlanta, where you are right now. And my career just kind of took off from there. MGM Grand in Las Vegas. My last major jobs were the House of Representatives as executive chef there with Hope Catering Company, part of Ridgewell's group. And then when I came back to Brunswick, I was at Little St. Simon's, which is a private island accessible only by boat, no more than 32 guests at a time, with its own very large garden there on the island. So Yeah, so that's kind of like the beginning, right? And I know that kind of was like a long way to get there, but in 2010, I am coming back home with my sister for a family reunion. We hadn't been to a family reunion in like 20 years. Outside of, while I was in DC, I was able to connect with folks that were my family that were like last name Raiford that I didn't even know existed, right? And here I am in DC. I go to this thing and I'm meeting family members, and someone said, "Oh, I saw your name as being the chef. How do you spell it?" So I spelled it Raiford. And she goes, "Oh, we might be family. Who's your dad?" And I said, "Oh, my dad's name, Ulysses Lee Raiford from Bridgeport, Connecticut." And she was like, "Junie." And I was like, "Junie?" Like, I was like, nobody calls my dad dad unless they know him, like from way back in the day, kind of know, right? And so all of a sudden I found this family that I didn't know existed that was in DC. So in 2010, when I had a chance, my sister and I had a chance to come home, I was twice as excited. I was like, oh shoot, I've met people on my dad's side of the family I didn't even know existed. Let me go to this family reunion and see what happens. And so I get to the family reunion. My sister and I, my Nana says, "Baby, we want to talk to you and your sister when you get a chance." And I was like, "Oh, yes, ma'am, no problem, And then literally at the end of the family reunion, my Nana, so because I come from a matriarchal family, you're told, not really asked a lot of stuff. So my Nana told my mom that it was time to get my sister and I to the table. And so we come to the table and we sit down, and I'm in my yes ma'am mode, all my good Southern, etiquette. And I was like, "Yes, ma'am. What's going on?" And she goes, "Baby, I've been asking, what we gonna do with all this land?" I just looked over at my sister. I looked back over at my Nana, and right as I was looking at my Nana, it felt like the ancestors just came down and was like, "Say this right now." And I was like, "Nana, I think we should go back to farming because that's what we know how to do." And then I looked back at my sister like, "Did I just say that?" Like, "Oh my God, I just said that." Oh. And then next thing you know, they reached under the table and gift deeded my sister and I like 13, 14 acres or something like that. Was like, "I guess y'all better get to farming." And next thing I was just like, "Oh my God, I can't even believe I said that."
And did you know anything about farming at this point?
Yeah, well, so I grew up out here. I grew
Right.
up.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just telling somebody the other day, like where the wild things are is an actual patch. Well, that I took you to that had all the blackberries, and then we walked back up to the loquat tree. So those are all those kinds of things that I was like, I grew up doing that. I grew up like making muscadine jam, and then my grandmother has always had muscadine brandy somewhere in the house for whenever, what else, you kind of thing. So I kind of grew up on that kind of stuff, but in my head, I didn't think I knew enough, So I decided that I would go back to school, and I went to UC Santa Cruz, the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. And next thing you know, I'm back at home in the late 2011, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, I'm home, right? And I had never spent more than from 1985, from January of 1986 to October 2011, I had never spent more than 3-4 days in Brunswick, Georgia. Never.
Wow.
And I will be able to, at some point, turn this legacy over to my children and hopefully their children. Because, I've always loved being here. Like, it's beautiful, right? Like, I'm 15
It's beautiful.
Miles, like literally from this farm to the beach is 15 miles, right? 1/3 of the marshland in the United States is right here, on the East Coast. It's right here. So it's beautiful. I'm glad to be back home. You know, I did learn something also. You know, my Nana had told me when I said I'd never, ever, 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 ever come back home, her response was, baby, you better stop saying never, because that's when you're going to do it. And literally, I'm back home.
When we met, it was really about when I was in search of my culinary history, and I was so taken by your stories and how you knew so much about your family and 6 generations and how you had really tied into that. And I was just in search of, and that's why I started talking to farmers like you. I was talking to people who I wanted to understand what their grandparents ate, what their great grandparents ate. And I want you to talk a little bit about the Gullah Geechee culture and what that means in terms of your food and what you're growing and how that connects to what I'm not sure that people outside of your culture really understand.
Right. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I'll definitely say is that I am what you would call a freshwater Geechee. Now, there's a difference between a freshwater Geechee and a saltwater Geechee. So a saltwater Geechee would be raised on the island or on an island of some sort. I was raised on the mainland, even though I'm not that far from the beach, but I would be considered freshwater because I'm on the mainland. The Gullah Geechee culture itself was basically after the enslavement of people from Africa. As that ended and there was massive white flight from the deep south, because it was like, oh wait, it really is more of them than there are of us, we're out. And so the thought process was they just gonna die out there because they don't know what to do. And none of us died, we thrived. Because what it took to live in the first place was already in us. So seafood became a very massive thing for us. So we were already building nets already. What did you think? We're gonna stop building the nets because you're not there? That doesn't equate, but that's what they thought. It was like, oh, y'all gonna stop farming because we're not there. Why would we stop farming? We still got to eat, you know? My running joke also is that when people talk about seed saving, I always come back to 2 groups of people that were seed saving before anybody even thought about the conversation. And that is the indigenous people that were here and then enslaved, because we brought seeds over here braided into our hair. So we were already about how do we move what we have to this other place. And then we changed and manipulated it so that it would thrive wherever we planted it, right? So I'll use like the Sea Island red pea is like it's like the preeminent thing right now, right? And it needs the most infertile soil as possible. Well, you leave me on an island, I'm gonna plant this pea and it thrives. Wait, it fixes nitrogen into the ground, but that's the educated word, right? Well, it also helps these other things grow as a companion. So I can plant corn next to it. Oh, wait, we're about to run into, oh, wait, we can plant melons and not just squash because melons vine also. So the thought process of the 3 sisters, the thought process of leaving us to die when we turned it into thriving is still what we do. And what's really interesting is, coming home, a lot of my thought process was like, okay, I have all this education. I understand I'm worldly now, but do you know that most of my farming practices on the farm go back to my great-great-grandfather? Like how I do compost and all that kind of stuff. The honey truck was like cow patties thrown in some water, heat, because it's hot as I don't know what here, and then letting it go out onto your farm. Well, that's not, now they call it compost tea. It's a highfalutin.
Okay.
So I think that there's a lot, I'm still doing all those exact same things. Even the cooking methods, like I think we spoke earlier, like, it's funny, my great grandmother was making a roux and has always made a roux So when I go to school and I'm like, oh, I know how to make this, everybody's looking at me like, nah, no, you don't. And I'm like, so you're thinking it has to be butter. We didn't have a lot of butter, but we always had a lot of lard. Same thing, it's a fat and it's flour. Oh, wait, y'all making gravy?
Right.
Like I used to say gravy on everything. And people like, no, we're not, we're making a sauce. And I was like, well, what did you thicken it with? You know, like if you thickened it with something, you made a gravy. Like if it was pure liquid, like water, and you thickened it, it was a gravy. Don't call it a sauce.
Right. I mean, and as you're talking, I think back to my grandmother who was making what she called boiled custard, which was a creme anglaise. We talked earlier, everybody, we were talking about even thinking about macaroni and cheese. And when you think about James Hemings, who was enslaved and also was enslaved by Jefferson, he was French trained. So all of that French training comes back here. So when we think about our food and soul food, you think about pasta. I mean, you think about the Chinese, right? Even before the Italians, and you think it doesn't even make sense that we would think of the bechamel as ours unless we're cooking it for somebody, because for the most part, I mean, not all Blacks are lactose intolerant, but many are. And so we may not naturally be eating that. So, but if we were cooking it, then we also started sharing it, and it also became our food. So you were talking about that you are freshwater Geechee. So talk to me about when people think, oh, shrimp and grits. Oh, that must be what you're eating. My grandfather was from South Carolina, and they ate rice all the time.
Right.
We did in Tennessee. We didn't eat as much rice. But
so
you all.
Well, so shrimp and grits for me is a Charlestonian thing. It's about South Carolina. It's about Charleston. I did not know anything about shrimp and grits till I actually came home in 2011 for the Shrimp and Grits Festival. I didn't know that people ate it. I mean, I knew that people ate it like that, don't get me wrong, but I didn't know that it was a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like a thing like that, because I didn't grow up on that. I grew up eating, like if we had a big pot of grits left over, we had some fried fish, like some croaker or some whiting, some butterfish or something like that, some stewed tomatoes and okra. But not shrimp. Like shrimp for us was like Low Country boils. It was like it was funny because I think I was telling you earlier, like going places and people talking about shrimp like it's like, oh my God, I had a shrimp cocktail and I was like, how much you pay for that? I was like, you crazy as hell. You know, because I'm like, I grew up getting these big giant shrimp out of the ocean myself. Like I grew up doing something called seining, and that's where one person holds a pole, it's a long net, one person walks out into the ocean, and so you're on a straight line, and then you slowly go out a little bit, and then that person curves, and then the two of you pull it all the way in. I've been doing that since I was 11, 12 years old. So I didn't know that people didn't eat shark, because I ate shark. Like if you caught a shark, you didn't let it go. Like you didn't let it go back in the, like, oh, okay, we got this one. All right, tap it in the head and let's keep it moving. So I was eating shark steaks in the 70s, right? I was eating, like, it's funny because I was eating like big giant prawns when I was like, I don't know, a baby, I guess, because we ate everything out of the ocean. Oysters.
Well, let me ask you about that. So when you first, when I think about shrimp and grits and I think about the way they are now, they are fatty, they have this gravy on, they have a lot of stuff. When you have access to really beautiful fresh shrimp, how do you eat them? And I'm obviously asking for a reason, but how do you enjoy them?
So it takes 2 minutes to cook a shrimp. So quick saute at the most. If I throw it in a low country boil, it's the last thing I throw in, and right like 5 minutes before I pull the pot out. Like Yeah, I would never think to eat shrimp with cream.
Right.
That is, it's like, why would you do that?
Well, I asked you because we both know BJ Dennis,
Yes.
and BJ, who's also Gullah Geechee, and I talked to his mom in this journey, and she said that the shrimp were so fresh that they didn't need anything else. They didn't need to mask it. So even if they did grits, which would never have dairy in them, they always made them with water. They maybe put a bay leaf in there, salt and pepper. And then so if they had something with shrimp, and you mentioned tomatoes and okra, it would just be something that was very fresh, because when you think about it, they are feasting on the land, you know, so you have the land, the sea, and it was very simple food, but also very delicious.
Definitely. You know, I think like inside my cookbook, it was really funny because someone happened to ask me, did you put that fried chicken recipe in there? And I was like, fried chicken recipe? I was like, which one are you talking about? They were like, the one that you say that how your grandmother used to make it. I said, oh, you talking about the 2-day? I said, yeah, I can put the 2-day in there. I said, because one, do you know that I did not learn how to fry chicken because I didn't grow up frying chicken? Like that wasn't, you didn't kill a chicken unless it was not laying an egg. So let's be clear. For 2 to 3 years, you're gonna get at least one egg a day, which is protein, which is food, from a chicken.
Which keeps on giving.
Which keeps on giving. If you kill a chicken, that meal is done. You don't go back to it. 2 years from now, you might remember that it had some lemon pepper wings or something like that, but you're not going to too much remember it, right? So, and then when you got a 2-3-year-old chicken, it was tough. It wasn't like, so that's why you marinated it in like buttermilk and all these things, because it was really and fermented peppers, because it was to break all that down that, you know, like I still know folks that don't like eating breast meat off of chicken because it's always dry. And I was like, well, I didn't grow up eating it like that. And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, well, because it was marinated for 2 days. Then it was thrown in the bag, floured, and fried. So that thing was so moist that you ate all of that chicken. But here's the thing. If you only do that on special occasions, it's not part of your thought process. I think I didn't really, you know, a friend of mine said, oh Lord, if people knew how much fried chicken we didn't eat, they'd be real upset. And if you really think about it, I mean, KFC wasn't made for Black folks to eat at. You know what I'm saying? Really. That wasn't the, you know, it wasn't our thing to fry chicken all the time. How that even became a true Southern thing, I don't know either, because no one fried chicken all the time. It takes too much work. Do you know how dirty a kitchen gets when you fry just one chicken? Nevertheless, a chicken, oh, by the way, I think a lot of people aren't remembering this. Back in the day, families were huge. So what would one chicken do for a family of 8 to 12? You got to kill how many chickens? Not going to.
Right. But I also think that brings up the point of celebration foods. And when it was special, you know, because you weren't eating them all the time. And I think these days we have, because we are wealthier, you know, because we're not the ones who are growing the food and everything, we just have to go to the grocery store. We were able to have, as a country, celebration foods all the time. And we sort of, you know, forgot that there are everyday foods and then there are celebration foods. And I think, speaking of oil, you bring up a point, and Lenny Sorensen, who's down in Virginia. Do you know Lenny Sorensen? I love her.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, she does these amazing dinners that are like a time and a place. But she talks about how expensive oil was. So even to fry in oil. So that was also very expensive. So something that we think is commonplace now wasn't really meant necessarily for us to have all the time. So if you're going to kill your chicken, that person, it better be special who was coming to dinner.
Better be special, like the deacon, like Pastor and them. Reverend somebody, you know?
Right, exactly. Now you mentioned your Nana, your
Mhm.
grandmother, and you also talk about the matriarchs when you went to that dinner and you saw Edna Lewis and you mentioned Leah Chase. And so can you talk about the role that they played in you just getting back to honoring, you know, your ancestry and the farm life and the culinary, you know, connection?
Yeah, you know, I think that's where the name of this comes from, the pinches, dashes, and drizzles, because that's literally how I originally learned how to cook. Well, I'll back up.
Mhm.
First of all, I'm a latchkey kid, and I'm the oldest. So I used to have to cook for my sister. And you've met Althea. You
Mhm.
know she is very picky, right? So I remember my mom came home, and actually the recipe's in the book. That's how good that whipping was that I got from that day. My mom left this recipe for porcupines on there, which are meatballs with rice in it with marinara
Mhm.
over the top. And so I made them just like the recipe said and gave them and was like, here, sis, you know, we're gonna eat it. It don't taste right. It don't taste like mama. Something wrong with it. Okay, well, if you don't eat, no problem. Mama get home, it's all good. My mom comes home and she sees my sister first. And she goes, did your brother feed you? She was like, no. My mom was like, so you didn't cook? You know, and it was just like, you're gonna get this spanking right now because you were supposed to take care of your sister, right? So then I'm the whole time trying to run from him, trying to explain, like, no, I cooked. Like I did. You know, my mom walks in and tastes it and was like, what? What is this? And I said, I followed the recipe. And she was like, oh, baby, let me tell you, a recipe is a guide. It ain't the end all to be all. She was like, whenever you look at a recipe, start thinking about, that sounds like too much. It might be a little bit of this. She said, you do know that depending on the part of the world you live in, you got to cook things at different temperatures. I was like, oh, what? You know, like when you're 11, you're not thinking like that, right?
Mhm.
But that was the first lesson, right, of me like really cooking on my own kind of a thing. But when I go back to being in the kitchen with like my great grandmother and my nana, it was always like, oh, baby, get over there and get me that cinnamon. Yep. Yeah, give me that milk out the refrigerator. And I was like, wait, okay, time out. Do we measure any of this? Am I supposed to remember any of this? No. You supposed to remember it. It's supposed to be up here. And you're supposed to be able to teach other people how to do it. Now, what's really
Okay.
interesting is when you think about the fact that there's this conversation about only uneducated people don't write things down. No, people that are stupid have to write things down because they can't remember. We're an oral people. We pass knowledge orally, and it's supposed to be remembered. And don't get me wrong, there are things that have to be written, but when it comes to very specific things like cooking, the arts, plumbing, electricity, like all those things, as we teach them, you better remember it. I told you, boy, how to do it. You better remember it. And I think that's always been that way. And so
Mhm.
watching them do the pinches and the drizzles and a little bit of this and pour this in, I started realizing like my hand is a measuring cup. You know, like I never saw
Mhm.
like I meant to bring it out. I probably have 30 different spoons and cups and measuring things throughout this whole house, right? You know how often I use them? I don't really. I usually end up using them when I'm doing a cooking class trying to get people to understand, you know, what a teaspoon actually looks like, right? And I grew up pinches, dashes, and drizzles. That's all it was. It was like, matter of fact, even when my nana made sweet potato pie,
Oh
I
my
showed
gosh.
her how to
Okay.
brush it over, but she didn't do all of that. She basically was like, "Oh, baby, you just go ahead and put that on like that and put it back in the oven. It'll caramelize up." And I was like, I need an amount. I need to know. And she was like, "I told you." And so
I want to go back to that, and I want to share this with everybody. So when I first met Matthew and we talked, and then I wanted to incorporate a recipe from these various young Black chefs that or just people, period, that I was learning from on this journey of trying to find my culinary history. And Matthew shared his Nana's secret to the best sweet potato pie. And it was brushing, like you bake the pie most of the way, and then you brush the condensed milk or the evaporated milk on top, and then you finish it in the oven. And then I think the other thing was the little pinch of nutmeg.
Yep, just a little bit.
Yeah. And you know what I loved about that? Yes to the recipe, but more than anything, yes to you sharing it. And I think that so many people don't share their recipes, and you're very generous. And I think it's because you come from the pinches, dashes, and drizzles. It's all about what you add to it. You know, it's not an exact science.
Right.
And it's also that you, and as you're saying this now, thinking about an oral history.
Mm-hmm.
And am I putting words in your mouth?
No, you're not. I mean, because I mean, even now, it's funny because Amy Page Condon, who helped me write the book, it was really funny because there was a point in time where, as I was turning my recipes in and asking her to kind of like, can you take another look at this? Can you check this out? Blah, blah, blah. She actually had to have conversations with me about how I was writing the recipes. Because I wasn't writing them like a chef would. I was actually writing them as though I was talking to someone, not even in recipe format, right? So it was like, oh, let's see, who do I see on here? I see Craig on here, right? I look over at Craig. Craig says, hey, Matthew, I want to know how to make a low country boil. I just was like, oh, you need some sausage and you need some this, some of that, da-da-da. Ta-da, you got a low country boil, you know, that kind of a thing. And she was like, we need some poundage on there. We need some flow. And I was like, oh, yeah. I'm gonna put that on there. But really in your head, you're trying to like, but that's the way I was also raised, even though I'm classically trained, right? I even went back to school to learn classic Italian cuisine just because I also had this thought that what I knew wasn't enough kind of a conversation. And that, you know, I look at the opportunities that are here right now as compared to what they were just like in 1996, right? So, or 97, or even 90, the 90s, the 80s, whatever. But, you know, as compared to now, there wasn't, like, I'm excited when I open up anything and see more people that look like me that are cooking and talking about their experience cooking. And I gives none of whether it's barbecue or fish or West Coast food or taco, I don't care. I just know that we have been around food. It's been part of our conversation. It's been part of everything that we do. You know, everything's done around the table. Like it's still kind of funny because like when I go over to my dad's house, I don't go over there to like sit down and eat per se, right? But every time I go over to my dad's house, my stepmom always says to me, oh, you smelled it, didn't you? I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, we knew you was gonna come over here. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, you never come to this house until right after dinner is done. And I never knew that in my subconscious, when I first moved home, my dad was always like, boy, you hungry? And I was like, no, I'm good. He was like, well, come up to the house later on. I'll have something ready for you. Because, you know, I'm living out here by myself, you know, and my Nana would do the same. So it kind of became a thing that around 5:30, 6 o'clock, I would just go over. I didn't know that I was actually going over because sometimes I'd already eaten. But now I look back at it and it was like, hey, food, family, love.
Yeah.
You know, it was, so that's the only way I know it, you know?
But how do you teach that? I mean, there are people, well, there are people who didn't grow up that way.
Right.
And so when we say feel it, I can feel food, but if you put me in front of a sewing machine, as much as I like crafts, I'm all thumbs. I don't get it. So
Right.
how, one, I know it's practice, but how would you say to somebody if they wanted to get the essence of a loved one's dish? How would you direct them to do it?
So it's two ways. One, first, you need to value every moment of time you can with that person if they are living. I actually have a video, and I rarely have shared it with anyone, of my Nana and I actually making sweet potato pie together. And it's super precious for me because it was the last time she made sweet potato pie.
Mm.
And so I've cherished those kinds of moments with people. And I've also, you know, the written language is like really interesting, but I still have old letters between my great grandmother and my grandmother where they're talking about food and planting and all of those kinds of things. So if you can't spend the time directly with the person, and I know because of the pandemic, that's changed a lot of stuff. So if you can talk to them on the phone, Zoom, whatever, cook it together, you know, do it together, because that's when all the questions flow, you know, and become magical.
Yeah, I see somebody on here, it's Melissa Marthal, saying, I sneak and write them down myself, but there are definitely no measurements associated yet. No measurements associated yet. Figure I get the framework there and go from there. And I noticed
Absolutely.
also in your cookbook, just the all of the papers and little notes that you still have, which is so precious. Even that. Oh, and but you all, I want. It's our 8:45, and I do want you all to give me your questions, and please just type in here. Just give me your questions so I can see, so we can ask Matthew in our final moments. Matthew, I was at your farm. We did an amazing dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a year and a half ago now.
Mm.
I mean, it was so good. And when I tell you, walking and being on your farm, and you feel the history. I mean, it is tactile. I mean, you feel it. So you told me that you're growing more crops. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I just want everybody to know I'm real Gullah Geechee, y'all. And to figure it out, I decided the main crop that we're growing this year for outside consumption is rice. This year we are working with Jubilee Justice, who is part of a nonprofit group that is getting rice back. And I am currently growing or finishing putting a black rice in, a scarlet rice, which is a red rice. These are all long grain, and an arborio. And thank you, sorry. Part of why I wanted to make sure that I did that was I love Carolina Gold rice. So let's just start off by me saying that. However, meaning more to follow, I ain't from Carolina. So I wanted to grow rice that I wanted to grow. So it was really interesting because when we were talking about the SRR rice method and everything, I said, hey, do y'all have some black rice I can grow? And everybody just went on pause. Like, they were like, did you say black rice? I said, yes. Do you all have black rice? And they were like, we do. And I said, well, can I grow that as my first year zero, trial. And they were like, oh, you most certainly can. And I was like,
and when
great.
you're mentioning black rice, as in like the forbidden Chinese rice?
Yeah, black rice.
Oh, okay. And somebody asked, how many acres do you have?
So now my sister and I have almost 40 acres of land total.
Okay.
But, and that's
how much is farmed?
Oh, so right now we're farming, if we count livestock, because I also have kuni hogs, I have chickens. We had some ducks. I think they're at the pond over at my cousin's now because they got tired of not giving them enough of the life in the water. Yeah, I say it's about 5 acres total, and we but we also have an additional 5 acres that's fenced off. I have one more piece of fencing that we just found out was down maybe during the last storms last year, which is 5 acres, an additional 5 acres that's ready for something like goats, which I think we're gonna put Spanish goats on there in the fall. So it's also about us growing and doing things here that would be indicative of being in my sense of place. So we're also getting, like I said, I'm growing kuni hogs right now, but we're going to add large blacks into that, because my first hog I raised at 10 was a large black hog that my sister likes to remind me, Grandpa told you not to name that hog, right? Which was true. They were like, don't do not name the hog, because when you do, and this was a large black, so I'm sitting down, right? And I'm 5'11". A large black comes up almost, its back is almost 3.5, 4 feet off the ground. So I used to ride that big black hog around, and my sister was like, and she was 4. So I'm 10, she was 4. And she still remembers my great-grandfather, who was blind at the time, saying to me, oh, so you did name it, huh? Well, I'm gonna show you what happens when you name a hog. And by the time it was all over with, I was hanging a ham in the smokehouse and all of that stuff. Because the thing was not just about naming it, but understanding that everything has a value and is supposed to be doing things. And so why get attached to something that you're gonna eventually, have to eat, pretty much.
Right.
And so now I call them hog. I'd be like, hey, chickens, how y'all doing? Y'all make sure y'all give me enough of them eggs, okay? Or, you will go in a pot, I keep a couple of roosters around just every now and then, just to let the hens know, hey, no, this is how your life is supposed to be. I want you to understand that. I understand I don't have to have roosters that a hen is gonna lay an egg every day. But one of the things my nana did remind me is you better keep them girls happy. So I leave my roosters out there, make sure my girls stay happy.
Well, speaking of staying happy, and this is a question from Melissa to both of us, actually. Given the pandemic, all of 2020, 2021, how have we reimagined our space in the food industry, if at all? And I can tell you, right before the pandemic, I was actually thinking about doing a frozen food line, and was having lots of meetings, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, the supply chain was going to dry up. So I pivoted, and I went on to do a licensing deal with Goldbelly with my recipes from the restaurant. So that was one of the things that I did. And people asked me if I wanted to do a restaurant, and I always thought, I never wanted a restaurant, but then I had it and I enjoyed it. And then it took a shorter time to fail than it did to plan. But everything that I learned in that restaurant, I am using now in a national space in terms of getting my food out there. So I will go back to the frozen food line, but I have enjoyed pivoting and almost having people able to order my food online.
My whole pivoting also actually didn't really come into like true pivot until this year. So I've been consulting for the last 2 years and consulting around restaurants and farming. And I've leaned a lot further towards farm to school than anything else, and actually the education of it. And so I've been working here recently with the Ferguson-Florissant School District in Missouri about a STEM program that they are creating, an innovation high school right now that will have a agro-culinology program that we are working to put together right now, so that kids have an opportunity to see a different part of food and food science, and understanding seed saving and what it means, especially with the turn from the pandemic. Here at the farm, what we decided to do, and within my own self, taking my branch of Farmer Matthew, knowing that the book was getting ready to come out, we've now created a lifestyle brand called Strong Roots 9. And the reason that it's called Strong Roots 9 is, one, the roots here run very, very deep, being Gullah Geechee, but the number 9 has a strong ancestral piece for me. And part of it is because Jupiter Gilliard paid $9 in taxes for 476 acres of land, and I'm here right now. So we call it Strong Roots 9. We have Zazu teas. We have hard grind coffee and spices. We have Kitchen Cure, which is part of a CBD line. And we just finished a deal for the aprons. Remember the apron that I had that just button right here? We just finished it on that, right? So by July of this year, everything should be completely done. And our whole thing was having a lifestyle brand that focused on, actually the clothing line is not basically for men, it's more for women than it is for men. And the reason being is because I've met way too many sisters was like, this chef coat don't fit me right. These pants don't fit me right. You know what I'm saying? Guys will put something on, we just keep it moving. And then I think the other thing was, quiet as it's kept, is that I consistently have looked at urban chef clothes and have noticed that urban means lots of tattoos and whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean urban. So I wanted to change, I want to change that. I think my running joke is, yeah, if sisters want to wear yoga pants in the kitchen, there needs to be yoga pants that they can wear in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just my thought process. So we're definitely moving on that lifestyle brand, and wanting to make sure that people understood that where we are culinary wise in the world today is actually where we were 100 and something years ago. Black folks are still cooking. We still creating things that have never been, like, people don't even think about it, right? Like, think about me. I'm Gullah Geechee, right? No one would have thought about someone Gullah Geechee in 2021 talking about creating a book, even though there have been many books written by folks from Gullah Geechee descent. They have been. This isn't new. I also am not doing anything new, y'all. I'm just framing it around Matthew. So I want to be very open to that also, is that the change that everyone is doing within the food industry is people are starting to realize, for the mental health piece also, is that they got to look inside as they create and do what they need to do. And that's why you're seeing more pop-up restaurants. You're seeing more folks that are doing food trucks. You are seeing more folks that are like, you know, we're not going to do the food like this anymore. We're actually getting ready to do it like this. I mean, what you just said about a frozen food line, like, if there was a thing, I wish there was an emoji that I could put up where my head just like opened up and fell back down. It blew off. Like, a frozen food line? What? Sea Hall? What? Yes, I'm buying that macaroni and cheese way before I buy anybody else's. If you have macaroni. I'm just...
I want to, Tasha Womack, she says, looking forward to reading your book. Matthew, my great-grandmother was a roots woman that made concoctions and potions for her community in Beaufort, South Carolina. Oh, Beaufort.
Buford.
Beaufort, South Carolina, something that I'm newly discovering about my heritage. I love that. Do you or Carla have any family recipes or knowledge passed down and even better made, because everything is back to nature's medicine bounty now? In fact, I'm simmering something now on my stove. I love that, Tasha.
Awesome. Well, Tasha, I have a couple of things. One, I'm gonna give you like, this used to be super old school, and my nana used to do it for the kids more so than anything else. So when wintertime came, we knew that if we went to see my nana, we'd get something to drink. And so sometimes we'd act like we had a cold, but most of the time we knew that if we acted that it was gonna be for real, for real. So my nana used to have a giant mason jar. Now, if everybody remember the old, long, big peppermint candies, the big,
Yes.
long, she used to pour a bottle of gin over a peppermint candy and close it every winter. The following winter, most of that would have melted. Now, back in the day, it was real peppermint. It wasn't a bunch of chemicals and stuff. And if you had a cold, if you even coughed, she would bring you a little shot glass. You'd sip it. You'd be, I mean, it was powerful. You literally would get in the bed and put the covers over you, and whatever was in you, it sweated it out. Like it was like pure, and you'd go straight to sleep. It was a toddy. You know, like when people think about hot toddies, it was basically a toddy. It was a warm shot, boom. The other thing though, that's growing here at the farm. And so one of the things I'll tell you, regardless of where you are in the world, pay attention to nature, right? Because flowers grow in cracks of concrete. So there's something going on with that, right? So the reason I say that is because on our farm currently, we have wild blackberries, we have mullein, good for upper respiratory issues and things like that. We have wild staghorn sumac, which is part of the sumac family, which we've used in a lot of different things around here, just as part of the seasoning. But we also grow a lot of mint. So one of the things that I grew up on as a kid, and I feel almost crazy that I didn't even put it in the book, was I never had like Lipton tea growing up. When I grew up, my mom had rose bushes and a mint patch in the front of the house. And I grew up drinking mint tea, just mint tea. And everybody knows all of the amazing things that mint can do for you. And so I would definitely say, Tasha, you can grow that in a bucket. You know, matter of fact, you might want to grow that in a bucket because mint will take over any place it goes into. It does not die. Like when you think mint is dead, trust me, it's found a root somewhere and it's gonna take.
Yeah, agreed. I can't think of anything.
And that's fine.
I can't think of anything that like that. Yeah, my mother, I'll ask my mother something and she'll come out with the story and I'm like, I don't remember. I'm going to read a couple comments, and I just appreciate all of you all coming out and hearing this amazing conversation with Matthew. And Matthew, before I read the comments, tell me what Bress and Yams means.
Okay, so Bress and Nyam means, and Gullah Geechee means bless and eat. So on one hand, bless and eat was, like Bress and Nyam would be, go ahead and bless your food and go ahead and eat, that kind of a thing. The other part of it for me was, I want this book to be a blessing as people are eating from it. And so Bress and Nyam just seemed very fitting. It was funny, someone asked me, well, did you have a hard time getting the publishers to do that? I was like, no. When they asked me what I wanted the name to be, I told them I wanted to be Bress and Nyam. And they were like, well, what does that mean? I said, it means bless and eat. And they were like, oh my God. Why hasn't someone used these words before? And I said, well,
yeah,
it's super cool right now, so I'm gonna take it.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much. Tasha says thank you. Portia Wilson, the gin story makes me think of how in West Indian culture you put rum on a teething child's gums to make them feel better. Yes, I've had that. Penryn C in Kentucky, it was moonshine whiskey and wild native honey for the toddy. Yeah. And so everybody has their thing. Matthew, thank you so much. Sorry, thank you. Thank you to MOFAD. This has been incredible. And every time I see you, I learn something new.
Awesome. Well, now, guess what? You and I got to get together and cook soon.
Yes, I would love that.
Just to cook.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you so much, Carla. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We'll see you soon. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.